Rachel Cooper, by the way. They don't say her name very often. The little lady's name is Miss Cooper. I've been blank. Every time I make these videos, I'm like, you should check the lady's name, Cooper, Miss Cooper. So what's interesting too is to think about Miss Cooper in terms of character. Miss Cooper is the opposite of Shelley Winters, the kid's mom, right? That Shelley Winters is easily brainwashed and nervous and trying to please others and doesn't have a personality or a will of her own. And Miss Cooper takes no bullshit at all. She doesn't buy Harry Powell's story about looking for these kids. She knows something's wrong immediately. She's strong and she's tough and she's willing to fight for the kids, whereas the kid's mom was really too weak to fight. Good. Okay. I want to say, kind of before I get into this kind of home stretch of thinking about this story. Oh shit! I forgot what I was going to say. I mentioned the stories are kind of fairy tales, so I think it's important that these big cosmic stories of good and evil. This Night of the Hunter is a kind of big cosmic story of good and evil, and is a fairy tale you can learn a lesson from. But that the story, it mentions other stories that connect to it. So, for example, Pearl sings a song about the fly whose children flew away. Obviously, that's a metaphor for John and Pearl flying away from their mother. John tells a story about an African king with 2 kids. That's obviously supposed to represent like him and Pearl, and the treasure that they got is supposed to represent the money from the dad. But the story of Moses and Jesus and Herod and the old lady mentions that Miss Cooper mentions the Bible stories, and so the Bible stories serve. Like Night of the Hunter, there's stories you can learn from about the cosmic battle between good and evil. And it's interesting that John at one point confuses Moses and Jesus, because she says John's a little bit like Moses, because John showed up to her house in a boat with no parents, and that's the story of Moses. It's these stories in the story. How do I put this? The stories in the story tell you about the story. Let's try that again. When the movie mentions other stories, like the African king and the fly with the children who flew away, when it mentions Bible stories like Moses, like Jesus, like Herod, these stories are stories that people use to help them navigate the world, right? The kids use the fairy tales to navigate the world, and the old lady uses the Bible, Miss Cooper, uses the Bible to help her navigate the world. But Night of the Hunter is a story like that, for you, the audience, to use to navigate the world, to think about larger issues. And if John sees that he's like Moses a little bit, do you feel like the world of the movie is a little like America a little bit, right? Stories are a way of understanding the world that you live in and navigating it. Stories are tools for navigating the world that you live in. And the characters in the story use the Bible to navigate, but you could use Night of the Hunter. So it's a way of thinking about stories and the value of stories. And just like the old lady, just like Miss Cooper, I keep saying old lady, just like Miss Cooper is the opposite of Shelley Winters' character, she's also the opposite of Reverend Powell, that they have this, it's essentially good church versus bad church. It's one interpretation of the Bible versus the other. And when he reads the Bible, he sees all of the violence and all of the hatred against women. And when she reads the Bible, she sees take care of the little ones, take care of people, be kind, be nonviolent. And even though she shoots a shotgun, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. She's and part of the key part of this thinking about the interpretation of the Bible is to think about the apple. The apple in this movie is John's scared of the Bible because that's what Reverend Powell uses, and so she has to kind of teach him that the Bible's something good. And they get an apple, and they eat an apple together. And then at the end of the movie, he brings her an apple on Christmas, Christian holiday, birth of Jesus. Jesus is the thing that makes her different from Powell. She's a Christian who believes in Jesus, and he's some kind of weird religion who just cares about the violent parts of the Bible. But and he gives her an apple as a present. Well, it's interesting because the apple, again, it's a symbol of it symbolizes purity, simplicity, right? It's an apple. It's the simplest, purest gift from the heart. But also, the apple is the fruit. Painters decided centuries later that the apple is the fruit from the Garden of Good and Evil that Eve took the bite of in the Bible. So the fact that the apple is both a sweet present for a little old lady and a symbol of sin captures the way that the Bible can go either way. You can read the Bible and become like Reverend Powell, or you can read the Bible and you can become like Miss Cooper. There's forces of evil in this world and forces of good, and they're battling it out. Cool, this is going really good. Miss Cooper is wonderful. I love her. When you first meet her, she sees the little kids and she gets a switch. She's like, I'm going to switch you. And she sort of chases after him with the thing. And for a split second, you might think she's bad news, but she turns out to be really nice. She washes them and cleans them and everything. When she's talking to Ruby, in one of the most heartbreaking scenes, she talks about, Ruby says that Mr. Powell bought her a magazine. And she says, and it's so sad, because how old is she, like 13? She says, and I didn't have to do nothing or anything. Like, I think she may be trading sort of sexual favors with boys for presents, which is incredibly sad. Because she's surprised that Mr. Powell didn't want a kiss from her or something. Or something more. I don't know how far she's going with her sort of sexual activities in the bad part of town with the drugstore. But Miss Cooper could get very mad at her for that. Right? She could be extremely angry at this young girl who's just admitted not only to lying to her about piano lessons, but also about that she's engaged in some kind of, buy me a magazine and I'll do X, Y, and Z on your body kind of situation, it seems like. Miss Powell could be furious with her. And in one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen in a movie, she says, she gives the most generous interpretation possible. She says, you're just looking for love in the only way that you know how. It's a very sweet thing to say. Because she recognizes, it's not just you're a sinner and I have to beat you, it's you're looking for love, there's other ways to do it. Sexual love is only one kind of love, and there's other kinds of love, like love for children. Let's talk about that. Ruby also says, oh, if I tell you, you'll whip me. And the old lady says, when did I ever? So she never hits the children. So that opening scene where she grabs the switch and chases John and Ruby, that's all talk. She's not a violent person. She would never hit a child. She just talks a big game, but she doesn't beat them. That's not how she gets them to do what she wants. She's kind to them. She hugs Ruby and says, you know what? I understand what you're doing. You're looking for love in the only way that you know how. And she tries to teach her a better form of love. Right, to think of love in a different way. Again, it's the interpretation of the apple could go either way. The interpretation of the Bible could go either way. The interpretation of love could go either way. So this is a movie that's like a big debate between these kinds of cosmic forces. Cool. And the finale of this violence is that she ultimately shoots Powell with a gun. Now, it's not a very satisfying scene on some level. You expect a big confrontation or a battle or a shootout. She just blasts him once and he runs away screaming like a cat. He's like leaping about, he's jumping around and yelling and screaming, and then he just like goes in the barn and is wounded all the way until morning when the cops show up to take him away. So on one hand, it's an unsatisfying ending because I expected like a big battle, but it's actually one of the best things about the movie, which is that she reveals him to be a total fucking fraud. He talks a big game, but he works with people who are weak. He goes after children and he goes after women who are easy to brainwash. But when he meets anybody with any backbone at all, he just folds. He's very easy. Evil is easy to defeat if you confront it, but a lot of people don't confront it. They just allow it to keep existing. And one of my favorite details is that she shoots him. Go back and look at the look on her face after she pulls the trigger. She's horrified. She did not want to shoot. She did not want to hurt anyone. She feels bad about the violence she's committed, even against a serial killer, because she's against violence. Unlike all the mob at the end, who's very eager to get their axes and their ropes and their pitchforks and kill people, she doesn't like violence. She will use it, but she feels terrible about it. It's a great piece of acting on the part of the actress. I forget her name right now. So it's a kind of lovely thing that she has for that scene. Okay, God, this is going really well. I think we're doing good. Probably only one more video and then we will be done. All right, I'll pick you up in the final video. Thank you for being out here at night for Night of the Hunter. One more video.